been dying to get this guy on air for a long time now, one-on-one, just because there's a lot of subjects I feel like I want to break down, and not many people get the world of basketball like Mr. Strickland here.
Appreciate it, sir.
Listen, from Toronto, obviously repping, we're going to have a frank talk right now. DeMar DeRozan and the Toronto Raptors. Now, listen, I'll give you more credit than probably a lot of people would give people who are on major networks, because you call it as it is all the time, and I appreciate that, and it's exactly why I want to have this conversation. DeMar DeRozan obviously re-signing for big money, saying he always felt part of Toronto. Now, there's part of me who, I know it goes back, but when they signed Kyle Lowry and he made his first All-Star team, I was looking at this team and I was like, do they have the ceiling to compete with the big boys long term? Because I know a lot of teams, they try to play for the playoffs, but I'm always stuck with years back with those Atlanta Hawks team. Remember Al Horford when he was real young, Josh Smith and Joe Johnson, that team that would get to the first, second round, but then never do anything better than that? Right. And I want better for my Raptors. Do you think that spending this much money on DeMar DeRozan, having JV locked up, Kyle Lowry, 30 years old, it's not like they're spring chickens. Do you think that this was the long-term best play for the Raptors? Because myself as a draft guy, I would have wanted them to kind of trade for major assets and capitalize on the positions that Lowry and DeMar are in.
Well, here's the thing. Are you always going to be in rebuilding mode? You don't want to do that. And I think that with the growth that the Raptors have had over the past 5 years under Dwayne Casey and the time that Masai Ujiri has been here, and he did say he had a 5-year plan, and by year 3, they did accomplish what he said he was going to accomplish. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. So it's hard to really be upset with the progress is made. Now, I do believe they jumped the line a bit, because in the past 2 years before this year, they flamed out in the first round, including getting swept by the Washington Wizards. But to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, that gave – DeMar knew he was playing with house money. Let's be fair. He knew that once they made it there, he made another all-star team. It didn't matter that either someone's going to throw something at him ridiculous and Toronto was going to match, because you can't let a two-time all-star who helped your team get to the Eastern Conference Finals walk for nothing. And what are the assets that are out there that will keep Toronto competitive? You talked about Kyle Lowry being who he is. You talked about JV being who he is. And then you have to look at the game itself. Is the game suited for JV to become that guy and step in for DeMar to be the essentially the number 2 on this team? I would say not at this point, especially if you can have someone like Bed Bath and Beyond step in for him and be as adequate as he was. Now, not to dismiss what JV brings to the team, but at the same time, I think you have to look at, okay, can we lock DeMar up, and could we be able to move him with the new economic strata of the NBA? And in 2 years, Kyle Lowry might be done. But Kyle Lowry made strides over the past year to get himself in better shape, better health, and he looked better for it. And the difference is all in the results. Like, we can say what we want to say, but Kyle Lowry lost weight, rededicated himself to the game. We can talk about his age, but at the end of the day, the guy helped his team get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So, is it, to answer your question, because I said I did a lot of setting up, was it advantageous for them to re-sign DeMar DeRozan? Absolutely. The money that is there, I'm always signing with the players. You should always get as much money as you can. Ask Dwayne Wade, because making sacrifices for your franchise is not the play. Okay, you have to do the best for you and your family, because your time is short in the NBA. And if you've already made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, have they reached the ceiling? I believe so. They didn't get the pieces. Jared Sullinger is not the answer at the 4. We know this. He's a good stopgap. But again, who is that guy that's going to take them over? Could they have possibly gone after another high visibility free agent? Well, I've been talking for the past couple of years that Kevin Wayne Durant might have the possibility of coming here. There's a lot of people in Toronto. He loves it here, apparently. But, the opportunity to win with the Warriors is more evident, readily evident right now than it is with the Raptors. And plus, they have a guy like, they locked out locked up DeMar Carroll to a pretty big contract. And you think about the contract that Kyle Lowry is on right now, it's a discount contract. I mean, he's making roughly, if you do the new math, he's making like $6 million a year. So that's nothing for having a two-time All-Star point guard and a starting point guard in the All-Star game on your roster.
Yeah, he's making the same money as, I believe, Miles Plumlee at this point. If you look at the new,
he's making less
yes,
than Plumlee.
Miles Plumlee is making more money than Kyle Lowry. That's very true. But look, in my estimation, when you roll back these Toronto Raptors, I kind of saw when Masai took over the team, everyone was saying, he's assessing his assets. And I totally get that. Like a lot of these guys, aside from Carroll and a lot of the smaller signings, he was given, right? He had JV, he had DeMar, he had Lowry on a side. But I always thought the long game was for him to maximize these assets. And because there are certain moves that make me believe that he's not sticking with this team, like their draft pick of Podol. While I have varying degrees of interest in this draft, but as a power forward, I don't see it in him. As a starting center, perhaps he has good feet, good hands. And so when they drafted him, are they going to move JV? Does Carroll fit the long term? Do you think this is more of how, let's say, the San Antonio Spurs would play their free agency and trade world in terms of maybe moving guys like Carroll and JV to contending teams and maybe Lowry? I agree with you with DeMar. Look, you have to sign the contracts. If they're offering you the money, you take the money. I get it. But for me, the real reason you do that is kind of what you may have been alluding to, that you have a trade asset. I mean, we'll talk about him later, but you couldn't have allowed DeMar to do what KD did to OKC and just walk, right? You couldn't lose him for nothing. So the fact that you have some pieces to move. But my biggest thing was, in this league, you need an alpha dog. You need an A option. And my issue is I kind of see all those guys as high B options. I have a problem with Kyle Lowry being your best player. I have a problem with DeMar DeRozan being your best player. If either one of them was your second best player, I get it. But I don't think the other one is enough to justify keeping them, all your talent, glued in that backcourt. And I really, really think that by the end of this season, we're not going to see Carroll, JV, Lowry, and DeMar all in a Raptors uniform. That's just my call.
No, and you know what? I think that you definitely have a case, especially with the idea that a true alpha, like Kyle Lowry didn't come to the league as a guy that someone said he's going to be an alpha. DeMar didn't come to the league like that. JV was an unknown commodity. And of course, DeMar Carroll is just a piece. He's a glue guy. He's, a piece and part. So at the end of the day, you have to look at this team, and sometimes you assess based on, and I think a lot of times people look at a team like the 2004 Detroit Pistons and try to compare this Raptors team in certain ways, especially when they had Biyombo. You have Ben Wallace, who was in the middle. Ben Wallace was not anyone coming out of Virginia Union when he was, drafted and went to Washington and Orlando and then up to Detroit. He became a star in Detroit because of the lineup they had. And Rasheed Wallace, while he had a bunch of promise, had also a bunch of problems on and off the court, right? But he was still good enough that he could offset some of his volatility at the same time. You had Chauncey Billups, who was a number 3 draft pick, who had bounced around and been traded in his rookie year from Boston to Toronto, played on 7 teams in the NBA, I think at that time, by the time he had made it to Detroit and became Mr. Big Shot. And I see a lot of that in Kyle Lowry, who also had been traded a couple of times early on in his career, Memphis, Houston, whatever the case might be, found a home in Toronto. When I look at a guy like DeMar Carroll, I see Tayshaun Prince, not to the degree from a defensive standpoint or from his just influence on the team. But you saw a lot of it early, and I think we're still dealing with a sample size on DeMar Carroll only because of the injuries and early in the year. So this year will be definitely an assessment point. When I start to look at this team, that's who I look at as a barometer. And I think that Masai's looking at it like that too. And it's not impossible to win something with a team like this. But when people talk about the so-called super teams, since 2010, there have been 5 different teams that have won the NBA Finals or NBA Championship. So much for super teams. So there's no guarantee that Golden State will win a title this year. I didn't have Golden State even going to the NBA Finals this past season. If you look at my article on the Western Conference preview that we did on TSN.ca, October 27th, 2015, I picked the Oklahoma City Thunder. They had the most talent in the league, and I just felt like they would be better with Billy Donovan. At the same time, I'm looking at the reason why we play the games. You can go 73-9, but if you don't close it out, what does it matter? And the better team won. I'm sorry. Where are they? My bad.
The Cleveland Cavaliers. Look, I get what you're saying about the super teams, and I think there are no guarantees. But when you looked at Golden State, now I'll totally give you props on the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Andre Iguodala would agree with you as well that maybe they should have been the champions that year. But
somebody's a little salty.
Somebody's a little salty.
Yeah. He just didn't want to give credit. He's taking shots. We know that, but take that L, son.
But he's laughing now, right? Because he actually got him to join the other team. See, I thought that one was the weirdest thing. Like, I'm not even as bothered with KD leaving. Like, I think if you were going to leave, maybe, I don't know, could you have done something for OKC who treated you so well? Do you even owe that to them? Maybe that's another question. But like, I don't even have a problem with him going to a team to win. I think the problem to me is it's the team that keeps beating you, right? Like, I would have had less issue, and I know you're going to find this weird, had he gone to Cleveland than Golden State, even though they're the champions, because he would have to face them in the finals. It's slightly different. And a small part of me was secretly hoping for all kind of karmic energies to balance, to see Kevin Love and Iman Shumpert traded for re-signed KD. Because in that world, you put Love with Westbrook in OKC, that UCLA connection, maybe get them to stay so OKC doesn't lose so bad. And then you have Durant, Kyrie, and LeBron as the new big three against the big three in Golden State. And I think that creates for a better, balanced, more interesting team.
Well, a couple things there. I, like you, don't care that Kevin Durant left. I think the Sam Presti didn't do enough to make sure he stayed there. And Kevin knew he had, again, we're talking about people playing with house money. Kevin Durant knew he had the strength as the level and type of player he was to move how he wanted to move, right? I thought that at the very least he'd come back and try again because they were up 3-1. And that would bother me personally for the rest of my life, that I had a team like that. And I'd already beaten the best Spurs team in NBA in their franchise history, and 67-win team. Just brought over LaMarcus Aldridge, who I said on NBA TV Canada's The Hangout. I asked this question after they had won the first two games in the series. Can you really trust LaMarcus Aldridge when it counted? And I don't, and I didn't. And then I saw David West on the game or on the floor when it counted the most. They paid,
and that's why they got Pau Gasol. Exactly to your point.
At the end of the day, LaMarcus Aldridge was not the answer down there. So you beat a team like this, the 67-win team and the Spurs. You're about to be a 73-win team in the Warriors. And then harken back to the 2012 season when they went to the NBA Finals. That season, they beat the 2010 NBA champions in the Lakers. They beat the 2011 champions in the Dallas Mavericks. And they beat a team in the Spurs who had won 19 straight before they got into the Western Conference Finals against them, and who also won 2 straight against the Thunder. So they had won 21 straight before they get swept to go into the NBA Finals. So the Thunder should have been at least in the NBA Finals a couple times. They went to the Western Conference Finals 4 times in the past 6 years.
And then there's all the injuries to Ibaka and then Westbrook, Durant.
We don't talk injuries. Just like you can have excuses last year with not LeBron, with Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving. There are no excuses. You have to get there. I'll put this to you, Phil, before we move forward. Every championship that's ever been won in any major sport has been predicated to some degree, in some shape, form, or fashion, on injury. Everyone that's been won. Every single one, without fail. Okay, that's just the nature of the business. So I don't even make excuses. I don't call into that. I leave that alone. what I'm saying is that Kevin Durant had an opportunity to change his trajectory and his history, and that he's never beaten LeBron either, right? And for him to go to Cleveland, I didn't see it. I actually saw Kevin Love going to Boston in a three-way trade. Kevin Love to Boston if they had lost. Kevin Love to Boston. Boston sending picks and parts to Chicago, who's rebuilding. Jimmy Butler going to Cleveland because he and Fred Hoiberg don't get along.
I was saying that exact same thing, but I've talked to too many people. There's no way that Chicago and Cleveland are sending, because I think everyone knows you send Jimmy Butler and force LeBron to play the 4, that team's not losing. I think the team that actually stops that, even though they get talent back, is Chicago, because they don't want to see the team that keeps beating them take that next step on their account.
They have no choice. That team is cooked for all intents and purposes. But again, going back to Kevin Durant, again, I don't have any issue with him as a free agent leaving. I just think that the way he did it and the team he went to, I don't see them winning anything, to tell you the truth. People are like, oh yeah, they don't have the same bench depth. And unless these guys all play 40 minutes a night, which they won't, because they don't
never
have the
get
bench,
injured.
and never get injured, because that's a possibility. Kevin Durant with his feet, like Steph Curry ankles. I'm not wishing injury on anyone, but you can't play Iguodala 70 games in the regular season and have him at top flight in the playoffs. You can't play Draymond, Steph, Clay, and Kevin Durant 40 minutes a night and have them ready for the playoffs. It's just not going to work. And I'm not saying that's what they're going to do. Of course, they're going to find you pick up David West and the great Zaza Pachulia. That's not the answer in the middle.
They could have 5 All-Stars next year, as Zaza was close last year.
Yeah, that was in Dallas. Let's not get out of control now. Let's not get out of control. But at the end of the day, you still have to go out and play the games. And that's why Cleveland, when they were down 3-1, they still had an opportunity. As long as you have life and you have breath. And somehow Steph Curry, the lone unanimous MVP in the NBA, has had 2 of the worst NBA finals for an MVP in NBA history. As a matter of fact, he has probably the 2 worst, which is crazy to me because he's scored points. But I think from a value standpoint, from a per standpoint, you're not getting everything you need to get from Steph Curry as a champion and as a leader, for an NBA championship level team. And has Kevin Durant done the same thing when he was in the 2012 NBA Finals? Again, you have to do it when it counts. And if you're 2 alphas, if you have 2 alphas on that team, and Steph is saying, I'll take a step back. How do you take a step back as a 2-time MVP and you're younger than Kevin Durant? So I see that on the surface, a lot of that will be partially on the plate. The reality is there's going to be some tension in that locker room. You talked about Joe Johnson earlier, and I was thinking about Joe Johnson in Phoenix when he was a number 4 guy behind
Sean Marion. I can't believe he left for Boston that year. It killed me.
I think didn't he leave for Atlanta? Joe Johnson came from Boston.
Sorry. He went to Atlanta in the Boris Diaw trade, I believe.
Right. And I'm just saying that, is Klay Alexander-Thompson going to feel like he's Joe Johnson? It won't be Draymond. It won't be Draymond that gets that feeling. It could be possibly Klay Thompson. And does Klay Thompson feel like, hey, I can leave my own team somewhere? You never know with these guys. And on the surface, it looks like family and fun. And at the end of the day, it's a business, and we have to understand that. So I don't begrudge Kevin Durant, but I do have an issue with who he went to some degree. And it's just I wouldn't do it, but that's my personal preference.
Although, as a weird closing point for the super teams talk, I was talking with a friend about this, and I was saying, okay, let's just say it's Cleveland Golden State matchup in the finals again. We all know that the playoff slows down. It's more ISO plays. So the depth matters, but to me, the top stars matter more. And when you have to list it, who was the best players in the finals last year, and then bring in KD, my question is, where does Curry and Kyrie land on that list? Because I'm probably saying LeBron, like who's going to be the best player in the finals if they meet again? I'm probably saying LeBron, KD, and I kind of want to say Kyrie because of last year's finals. And then
you wouldn't be mistaken, because Kyrie Irving said last year, if he and Kevin Love had played, they'd won the title last year. And we'll never know, but we have a very good sample size understanding of what Kyrie Irving was saying because of what he did. He dominated for the most part 6 or 7 games against Steph Curry. So again, I would say his words were empty calorie words if he hadn't shown improvement in the finals like he did this year. And in game 1 of the series last year when he got injured, he made a game-saving block on Steph Curry at the end of before overtime, and they were in the final, like they were in the game. Imagine if they had won game 1 there, and then he didn't get injured. I mean, you could do all kinds of possibilities, but at the end of the day, we'll never know what would have happened the year before. But this year we saw it, and we saw a guy who stepped up and made his name in the NBA Finals, and that's when you really make your legend in the playoffs.
And that's my point, because essentially everyone's like, Golden State's going to run away with it. But I'm like, well, Cleveland still has the top 2 out of the top 3 players in that series. And when it comes down to slow it down, playoff basketball, I still kind of like the team with the top 2 players, especially because you have the best. And LeBron James, until he's proven otherwise, is easily the best player on either one of these rosters by a country mile in my eyes.
He's proven to be an X factor no matter where he goes. And I used to say, after he did the decision, I did say I wanted to see him do this mercenary thing, like kind of Deion Sanders, going to a team and just making them like a champion because of his influence alone. And you can't tell me that a team that was the worst team in the NBA the 4 years he was away from Cleveland, the worst team with Kyrie Irving, with the worst team, Kevin Love never made the playoffs, Kyrie Irving never played in the playoff game, comes back and he makes it to the NBA Finals because of one man. And I'm not saying just him alone, but his influence on that team and on that roster and his understanding of how to get there. And that he's been, as much as people make light of, not 1 time, not 2 time, not 3 time, he's been in the finals 6 years in a row. Like, there's something to be said for that. But again, you know, the detractors will speak to his losing record.
He went 6 games with Matthew Dellavedova. Let's just call it that.
You know, I mean, you know, to me right now, well, after this 3-1 comeback or come from behind victory, I'm starting to put LeBron in that kind of GOAT category because you can't dispute a man leading every statistical category on your team, and for both teams in the NBA Finals. That's absurd. That's video game numbers. And despite the losing record, before this series, LeBron or Magic Johnson is my GOAT until, you know, maybe I'm going to wait for LeBron until he's finished with his career. Magic Johnson is my GOAT, and this is why. He played 9 finals in 11 years in the NBA, right? The guy was 5-4 in the finals, including getting swept twice. When you look at the level of the teams he played against in the finals and who he lost to, top 10 teams in the NBA Finals of all time, top 5, some of them top 5. Losing to the Celtics, he lost to the Celtics, what, twice? And he lost to the Pistons, and who else? And lost to the Bulls, right? And the Bulls weren't even the Bulls in 91. And that team that Magic took to the finals in 91, they never should have been there. But Magic took them to the finals by himself. They should have never beaten Portland in that series. But anyway, he's 5-4 in the finals, including getting swept twice, and he's my GOAT. Why? Because of the level of competition. If you look at the teams that LeBron James has played in the NBA Finals, he's played the Spurs 3 times. He's played the Spurs 3 times. Not to discount Dallas because they had Dirk, they had another Hall of Famer and Jason Kidd, but they were a bit older. They're not that level of team. As you saw, they didn't even make the NBA Finals again after that. But you look at a team like Golden State, who he's played twice, the Spurs, who he's played twice, right? You know, and OKC, that team they played in 2012 with Ibaka, Harden, Westbrook, and Durant. The level of teams that he's played in the finals puts him in that same category for the same reasons that I talk about Magic.
And especially if he wins this year against apparently the greatest combination of shooters ever in the NBA, as some people are saying, especially if Ray Allen decides to sign on the dotted line. I would treat Walter Ray Allen like they treated Wardell Stephen Curry in the NBA Finals this year. You haven't played basketball in 2 years competitively, like more than 2 years. And every time I get the ball, I would ISO you and make you an assistant coach. Every possession, I'm going right at you.
And I'll do the same thing to Steph Curry. It's not like Kevin Durant can hide his defensive deficiencies. Like, that's not going to make up for it. And when Ty Lue figured that out, it was a wrap.
Yeah, no. Well, Ty Lue figured that out starting in the Toronto series. As soon as they realized they just had to double DeMar and Lowry and then just let the rest shoot, he was on another level. But we will move on to another subject. So we're talking about KD, obviously, and the player he left behind, Russell Westbrook. Been hearing a bit of Mr. Kia commercial Blake Griffin from Oklahoma. Perhaps he's going to be a free agent. Do you think there's any reality to this, or is there no way he's leaving Lob City? Because I kind of like that idea, because I always thought that KD and Westbrook never really made sense, and secretly I think KD kind of wanted them to trade Westbrook. That's just my little insider thing, but I think having a real forward who doesn't need to dominate the ball on the wing like Durant did will actually benefit Russell Westbrook. And I actually think Steven Adams, Blake Griffin, and Russell Westbrook can be a contending team. Agree, disagree?
I think it could be. And I like Stone Cold Steven Adams in the middle, who's shown that he has more than just defense and rebounding in his arsenal. He showed a lot of good offensive skill. I think a lot of that goes to Monty Williams and Billy Donovan for making them believe that he could be that kind of player for them. But when I look at the possibility of this movement, who do the Thunder move to get a Blake Griffin? And
free agent next year.
Yeah, next year. And so they have to lock up Russell. He's going to ask for $200 million, and you have to give Blake somewhere in that same range. He has to make more than Mike Conley.
And you have to pay Adams too, because he's a free agent.
And you're gonna pay Adams. He's gonna make at least 80, 90. So at the end of the day,
you got to move Cantor then, because he's at 17 a game.
17. For a team that is so cap averse as Clay Bennett's OKC Thunder, we had this issue with Jeff Green, had this issue again with James Harden, and they were going to have to pay Russell and Kevin Durant at some point. So somebody had to go. And I think either they're going to rebuild and move Russell Westbrook before they lose him too, and Sam Presti won't have that same prestige they once had as one of the top.
But they're not going to get much for him, and you know that. If he's a free agent, they know he's going to walk. Like, who's going to trade a lot for him unless they know he's going to sign?
Then, I mean, you know what? Getting Russell Westbrook as a rental for a certain team might not be a bad deal for the rest of the season. So I see this being more of a trade deadline move than anything else. You don't have, unless you have the right parts, unless you say, okay, we'll trade Chris Paul, who's older, and trade Russell Westbrook to the Clippers now, and know that we're going to be rebuilding. Chris Paul's not going to stay there. He'll play the rest of the year or be injured and mentor Cameron Payne, and then he'll be a free agent. That's one thing that makes sense to me in this, because you don't know where you can move. And like you said, it's tough to say that Russell Westbrook will stay in a certain situation. Would he stay with DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin and JJ Redick in a situation there in LA where he's from? Yeah. I think he would stay there. I think that Doc Rivers would engender the kind of trust and belief in him. I think that Steve Ballmer would do enough to keep Russell Westbrook happy there. So that's a move that I can see happening that makes sense. Are they talking about possibly moving him somewhere else? Like, I can't see him going to Boston with Al Horford. I think that's not the play. I think that
I would love to see him in San Antonio, but there are no pieces coming back. Like, see that lot, like Russ and Leonard. I kind of like that.
Yeah, but I mean, let's talk reality here. And I think the most optimistic situation would be probably working with the Clippers to make that happen. That's the only way I could see Blake Griffin and Russell Westbrook playing together, because the Clippers or the Thunder don't have enough pieces that make sense to Doc Rivers to move Blake Griffin for nothing.
What if you take Westbrook, and I know this sounds weird and you're talking 1 year rental, but there's a team that's actually getting up there and a lot of their primes are hitting, and that's the Utah Jazz with a glut of young players. What if you went to OKC and said, listen, I'll give you, Dante Exum, who hasn't played a game, and I'll give you Alex Burks and Trey Lyles. Then you get Westbrook. And look, because what I've always wanted to create for Westbrook is like a 2001 Allen Iverson team with the 76ers, how it's him and defense. And then you put Westbrook, Favors, Gobert, Hayward as the second guy, and Hood. I think
Hayward's
that team worked.
Hayward's not staying there. He's not staying there after this. At the end of this contract, after he saw what Chandler Parsons got, and Chandler Parsons basically followed his blueprint when Gordon Hayward re-signed for the money he signed for in Utah. When he sees this, he's going to go somewhere else. And we've seen this lineup with defense and shooters or scorers in Portland that actually worked this year, because no one's saying Farouk El-Aminu is that guy. No one's saying that Miles Plumlee is that guy. Or is it Mason? I always get them mixed up.
It's Mason
Plumlee
in Portland and
right.
Miles in Milwaukee.
No doubt. So Mason Plumlee's that guy. No one's saying Ed Davis is that guy. But again, you're talking about the Philadelphia team. That is the modern day, to some degree, Philadelphia team with Big Game Dame and CJ McCollum in the backcourt. So you can see that there. I don't see that in Utah, and I don't see.
But there's a big difference between Mason Plumlee, Ed Davis compared to Rudy Gobert, Derek Favors, right? And then the same.
And stay on the court though, and Rudy Gobert's been injured a little bit lately.
Yeah, but he's still got Trey Lyles. I like him. I think he's shown a bit in the summer. Like, I'm not saying he's a starter, but like for time missed and Aminu, I mean, Hayward, even if he does run away, is going to play at least one more year, is way better than Aminu. And Burks or Hood or whoever you have to go. And they got Joe Johnson, too. Let's not forget. He signed a 2-year $20. So they have another big wing. I'm just saying.
Joe Johnson is old as hell. Come on, man.
I don't care even if he plays 20 minutes. I just want to create a team that's going to beat Golden State that lives in the West. And in my weird mind, I think that's the team that makes it happen just because of their length. Yeah, well, if you can get Westbrook there and keep some of that front court length and talent, I think you have that.
You know, that's an interesting thing to examine. I'll probably look at that. I picked Utah as my sneaky good team this year. I thought they would make the playoffs, and they should have at the bottom of the division or the conference, actually. I thought they would win between 40 and 43 games, and 43 games would have gotten them into the playoffs. I think they won 40, 39?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're right in that area.
Well, there were so many injuries to many of their key guys. Dante Exum didn't play like at all, and he was supposed to be their point guard of the future. I mean, their whole point guard situation, I just let them down, right? Because George Hill is new to this team. Like before this, it was Trey Burke and
Sylvan Mack and guys like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's the
I mean, those are the dudes who are going up against the Chris Pauls, Westbrooks every night, right? And you wonder why you're losing. And especially considering, aside from Hayward, there's not a whole lot of guys, maybe Burks, who was also injured, who are creating their own shots, right? Like guys like Favors and Gobert, you need to feed. And so you need to have the guys to facilitate that offense. And
I like Rodney Hood as a 6'10" two guard in that backcourt, though.
Absolutely.
I like that, and I think that Quinn Snyder.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's the perfect trade partner, though, because they have so many assets that they can afford to pass some youth over to OKC, even on a rental.
But that sounds like Boston now. The same before this.
Don't even get me started on this Boston talk. People keep talking about Boston with their assets. I couldn't even begin to disagree more compared to how.
If he had done this before the draft, they had assets. Now it's like, whatever. Danny Ainge doesn't hold the same kind of sway that he did before the draft with all those picks that he does now. So I think it's a little bit different. And he has to tread on Isaiah Thomas and the idea of Al Horford being there and stable. But again, that team will always have a ceiling. Al Horford's a good player. He's not a star player. He's not a star player. And for them to get, I don't know if they're going to compete to the degree that they want to compete in the Eastern Conference. I like Jay Crowder, my man, the one-man army, Jay Crowder. But I just don't think they have the pieces to compete in that way.
He's got some competition now with Jaylen Brown. But if they did move Brown and Smart for Westbrook, if I'm OKC, I think about that. And then if I can keep Crowder, Horford, and Westbrook, I think that's a team with, in my mind, a top 3 coach in the league. In Boston there. I think that's a team that actually jumps over Toronto and becomes that number 2 team.
But see, that's more plausible to me than them sending him to Utah. That's way more plausible. Unless they want to punish Russell Westbrook. Unless they want to punish Russell Westbrook, they don't send him to Salt Lake City. Right?
That's true.
So I don't know. And
All
plus,
right.
you'll have them out of the conference too if you're sending them to Boston. Too
Oh,
real.
fair enough.
Are you ready to rock? Well, get ready this Saturday, July 23rd at Oscar Peterson Park. There in Mount Too Real, Montreal. What's up, baby? Ready to go. Full Court 21 Canada, all across the world, all across the country, but coming into your area. Make sure you sign up at Eventbrite. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And do remember, you against the world, no teammates, bring your game, do work.